All right, I've gotten a lot of interest in what I'm calling the stick press recently. A lot of people have asked me a lot of questions. So two things I want to go over on a video here. One, specifics on how I made this stick press. Two, we need to talk about leverage. Some people have been building stick presses, which thrills me. I'm stoked that everyone likes the design, gets the concept, but I've seen some not so, maybe not the best decision making, or maybe not the best understanding of what's going on with the stick press. So I want to talk about leverage and material choices. First of all, you go back and watch my my earlier video on the stick press. All the stick press is square piece of plywood. It's a thick piece of plywood. This isn't Baltic birch. It's an inch thick. Freedom units here in the United States. I don't know how many centimeters. An inch. Inch thick, Baltic birch, super stout. I got it because it's smooth. I can route the edges. I can make it look pretty. Here in the US, we use typically on subfloors for home building, 1 inch. I can't speak tonight. Plywood that's 1.25 inches thick, or 1 1/8 inches maybe. You can buy 4x8 sheets of that at Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, whatever it is you go to, probably for like $60. That would make a lot of stick presses, right? Like if you made a stick press the same size as mine, 1 foot by 1 foot, you get a bunch of stick presses out of it. Anyway, thick plywood. These are U-bolts. I got them at the hardware store. They come in different sizes. These happen to be, looks like 5/16 diameter. These are about 2 inches across. So 2 inches across. What I did on this one is, since my plywood's 12 by 12 roughly, I went 1/3 of the way down. I went 4 inches down to the center of the U-bolt. 4 inches from this side to the center of the U-bolt. That way they're 4 inches apart. 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches, if you follow me. The top, also thick. I'm using more plywood for the fulcrum, which is just where the sticks are going to press down on the top of the press. You could have used, I thought about using a piece of pipe, a piece of oak, a piece of angle iron, something. But what I did consider was, depending on the material, if it was angle iron or something, it would tear up my levers. So had plenty of this around because I had to cut the top smaller than the bottom to make room for the U-bolts. Someone's gonna ask me, it's 9.5 by 12, okay? So another thing we need to keep in mind when we're making this, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the U-bolts. U-bolts are countersunk. I just used a spade bit, drilled halfway through the plywood or far enough to get that nut below the back surface, because I wanted this to be absolutely flat on my table, so when I'm leaning on it with my body weight, I'm not trying to bend the plywood. I know the plywood's really thick and probably won't bend, but I want maximum rigidity out of this whole setup. So plywood, made the top. How did I determine the thickness or the height of this piece that is the fulcrum? If you don't know what I mean by fulcrum and lever, hit up YouTube, do some like basic leverage. The principles of leverage is what you want to look up. Another thing that I've seen is people do this and they're building the press fine, but their lever is super short. And the biggest deal here is the relationship between this little short piece from my anchor point to my fulcrum all the way out to here. The larger this ratio is, or the longer this handle is in compared to that anchor point to fulcrum, the more force you'll be able to put down and in in your press. So you could do this a number of ways. You could get really long handles, but I can only reach so far. The reason I've got 2 anchor points so I can press in 2 places is so that my press stays flat. You know, I could get a really long handle, but then my press would go up in the air every time I pushed on it and nothing would happen. So 2 handles, I lean my body weight on there. I'm putting pretty good force on because my mechanical advantage is just like, there's 1, okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like 4 to 1. So I think, I'm not a physicist, I don't know all that, like I haven't watched all the YouTube videos on leverage, but I think what this means is for every pound that I put down on this, I'm getting 4 pounds of pressure. 4 to 1, 4 to 1. Could be wrong, but whatever it is, what I do know is the longer the lever, the more squishing power I have, okay? So keep that in mind. Longer levers are better. If you've got a, what is this? If I've got 5.5 inches from here to here and I only make a lever that's 5.5 inches, I might as well just be, that may not be true, but I feel like I might as well just be leaning on the thing. So, specifics, again, for people who ask me, I made this one 12 inches by about 9.5 on the top, inch thick. This is also an inch thick. And the reason I went an inch thick, besides the fact that the plywood was an inch, is I wanted the levers to lay pretty flat when I had the bed with the press loaded. So you get a piece of linoleum in here, some sort of blanket. I'm a cheap individual and I have found that craft foam works pretty well on this. So I've got craft foam. Now my lever is pointing up just a bit, which is great. Other one's pointing up in the air just a bit, just up from flat. That way I can lean on this thing and I've got as close to 90 degrees, 90 from the stick pushing down on the bed as possible. Like if this fulcrum was up here when I'm pushing down, my force is actually going in at an angle and the 2 sticks will be trying to twist the bed. So you want to be pushing down. So the closer you can get to 90 right here, the better. You're not going to get things slipping around. All right. I could go on. I'd love to talk more about it. I'd love to, I don't know, let's have a press making party. If there's anyone in Northern California who wants to make a stick press, let's go buy a sheet of 4x8 plywood and make 16 of them for $100 or something. But that's my stick press. Again, it's portable. I use 2 sticks so it doesn't roll over. If you had a really heavy workbench, like this particular workbench is 600 pounds, well, you could put 1 anchor point on your workbench and use 1 big old long lever. I think I'm gonna try it. Okay, so check this out. I made a ginormous stick press. No, I just kind of came up with crap laying around my shop and I'm gonna try to demonstrate a ginormous stick press. So here I've got an anchor point. I'm on a really heavy table. I think the tabletop was like 600 pounds plus all the junk underneath it. Anyway, my point being, if you have a robust table, you could make an anchor point on your table and use a much longer lever. Say you're a small person and you don't, all 95 pounds of you doesn't really push down on the press that much. You could go this route. So let's just pretend this is the press bed. This is something stout, 3/8 inch steel to push down with. That might be about right. I got a bar here. It's about 1 inch in diameter, about 6 feet long. I would imagine that if I lean on this thing way out here, I am gonna generate enough squishing power to screw up a linoleum block pretty good. So, I don't wanna do that. Way back when, I dabbled with intaglio stuff, printmaking in college. And so we're just gonna play with that. I found a little plate that I made long ago, inked it up, moistened and blotted paper. I'll put that right there. And I need a blanket. Oh, bummer. I left the craft foam in the house. Right back. Okay, I'm back. So if you know anything about intaglio printmaking, traditionally, you know, we artists have used roller presses that generate a tremendous amount of force, thousands of pounds of pressure on the paper. I think in some cases, 2 rollers rolling together, squish the paper into the inked plate, the ink in the little tiny grooves and recesses in the paper, then gets picked up by the paper, or in the plate gets picked up by the paper. You can't do it like you do relief printing. You have to have a press. So I'm gonna be stoked if I can pull off a little intaglio printmaking with a big old ugly, made out of scrap junk in my shop stick press. But here it is, you see it loaded up. I'm just gonna lean on this thing. I weigh something like 175 pounds. My feet are off the ground and I'm bouncing around. This rod, it's actually a digging bar. It's about 1 inch in diameter, solid steel. It was flexing a bit. I think we're generating some pretty good force on this. Let's see what happens. Ooh, see what it did to the craft foam? Look at the embossment. That was a lot of force, folks. And bam! Intaglio printing with a stick press. I just did intaglio with a really robust stick press. That is pretty exciting because I don't have an etching press, but I could do little itty bitty etchings with a big stick press. Hope that helps you understand the concept of the stick press. You'll notice with this press that I just hobbled together here. Remember I was talking about the ratio of the anchor point to the fulcrum to the lever? Well, look at this. I mean, this anchor point was close, like 3 inches. 3 inches from here to the center point where I was pushing down. And then out here where I was leaning on it, this thing is 51 inches long. Now, my body weight was probably somewhere out here about 40 inches. You do the math, 43, okay? Lots of mechanical advantage. And again, you know, there's a million ways you can make a stick press. 2 sticks opposing or 1 big long one on a really solid anchor. There you go. That's my 411 unscripted stick press 101 tutorial for the evening. Thanks.